We have an interesting session with a very interesting executive from Microsoft, so I'd like to just get right into that. Steven Sinofsky.
Hey there, I brought you something.
You brought me something?
Some sugar-free candy.
Sugar-free candy. Thanks.
It's for our relationship.
Yes, somebody published that we had a personal relationship.
Personal
so
long-term relationship.
I just got candy. There you go. So, talk about first of all, what's your glorious title at Microsoft? Explain.
My glorious title is President of the Windows and Windows Live team.
So, you're in charge of Windows, essentially. It's
Windows and Windows Live and Internet
And you used to
Explorer.
be in charge of Office.
Yep, I worked on Office for about 12 years. 12 years, yeah.
So that's most of the money at Microsoft, those two things, right?
I just like to think of it as cool software, too.
Oh, you do? Okay. And just for sense of scale, how many people work for you on Windows and Windows Live?
On Windows and Windows Live, we have about 1,400 or 1,500 software design engineers. And then you have testers and program managers, but the organization overall is about 6,000 people.
6,000 people just on Windows.
Windows, Windows Live, Internet Explorer, and all the marketing and outbound work.
And Microsoft itself is nearly 100,000 people.
Close to that. Not that close, but close.
Okay, so how do you feel about not being in the Gang of Four that's running the internet, that's running the world?
I'm watching it, and I'm like, I feel like, Microsoft is like auditioning on The Voice, and we're just waiting to get picked. Like, even if the country guy would pick us, I would have been happy. But, I mean, whatever. I mean,
seriously, 20 years ago, 15 years ago even, we might have said there was a gang of one, and it was Microsoft. Now we have an esteemed leader of the industry with no competitive interest towards you coming up on stage and, objectively listing the four companies that matter, and you're not in them.
Well, nothing called the Gang of Four ends well, so I didn't really... I didn't really want to be part of that one, but I think, there's just so much going on, and the thing that struck me the most was it's an interesting group of companies, lots of creative work, but the one thing that gets left out of that kind of discussion is the way that 90 or 95% of the world gets on the internet in the first place is through Windows.
It's not through mobile in a lot of countries instead
of
PCs?
Well, it is a lot of it mobile, but if you look at, pick metrics of hours of consumption or bytes or how many hours people spend in front of devices and things like that, it's, there's a lot of usage of Windows. And so leaving that out is an odd way to sort of gerrymander the gang, so to speak.
Well, I know it's a little unfair because you're not the CEO of Microsoft. I'd have to check, but I think you're not the CEO
No.
of Microsoft. But you are the Microsoft person here, so I'll ask you, you have missed a couple things. Your company has missed a couple of things that have gone on, right? Kind of the big sort of iPhone thing that started with the iPhone on smartphones.
Well, we definitely missed the iPhone, like we didn't do that one.
No, come on, Steven. The big new super smartphone revolution, you're in it now.
We have a new entry, we're trying hard. Yeah.
But you're years late on that. We're still not seeing tablets with a real tablet gesture touch, multi-touch optimized OS from you. And it's been, what is it? When did the iPad come out? Like 16, 17 months ago?
Just about, yeah.
I know you've done many tablets before. They haven't succeeded, but this newer round, you're not there. So what's going on? Why? Because I know you have smart people, really. I go to all these companies. I don't find any difference in the smartness, intelligence, creativity, hard work of the people at your company and the people at the Gang of Four companies, let's say, and even some of these smaller startups. So why? Is it because you're big and bureaucratic, or what's the deal?
Well, look, there's always things that we're doing well and always things that we're not doing well. And so you pick two of the things that we didn't do particularly well on. And that doesn't mean we're out of the game. It's a long game. You don't want to write people off too early in it. It has only been 16 or 17 months, which,
on the tablet.
On the tablet. And
You were a little later on the phone.
We were later on the phone, but it also had more success at the time in a relative scale in the world of phones. But I think it's just more opportunity for us to do a better job. I mean, there's not some magical answer to that. We didn't do the job, and now we're working.
So you don't think there's a systemic issue of being nimble at Microsoft?
I don't really think so. You have to. One of the ways that it's challenging to always talk about is how when something comes out, then everybody wants the immediate response from every company. But things are always happening in parallel. And you said there are lots of smart people at other companies, and it turns out we're all sort of looking.
Well,
at
I was saying there are lots of smart people at Microsoft too.
As well, and so we're all looking at the same problem space and pulling many of the same components to build solutions. And so then we're all piecing them together at not just different ways, which make us all unique, and some of the ways work and some of the ways don't work, but also on different rhythms and different time scales. I mean, like the world of browsers looks a lot like that. People are doing some things and other people are busy working, and then someone releases, and then some time goes by and another person releases. But it has only been 16 months on the iPad, and certainly phones were a little bit longer, and we aren't there yet. And so we're just going to keep working and keep trying. And I think here today we'll talk about some of the things we're doing certainly on the touch user interface world or the touch world.
Well, why don't we not waste time?
Okay.
Why don't we talk about that?
Okay.
So you have two, or maybe more than two, but you have two well-known operating systems, right? I mean, we're not going to go through all the SKUs of Windows and everything. You have Windows.
Oh, just toss that in there. Okay, fine. That's fair enough.
You want to defend all the SKUs of Windows?
Can I have a chocolate?
So you have Windows, which is still the dominant, by far, computer operating system, and I'm sure used by many people in the room every day, probably right now, somewhere. And you have, somewhere in the building, and you have Windows Phone 7, which is much newer, and it's the sort of your entry in the super smartphone game. How are you going to get to the tablet, the multi-touch tablet?
Sure. Well,
are you going to go down from Windows? Are you going to go up from Windows Phone or something new? What are you going to do?
Well, what we are doing and what we're going to talk about today is how we're going to build on sort of the flexibility of Windows, the Windows operating system that's in PCs today, and extend it to a broader range of user interaction and a broader range of platforms, if you will, or form factors, if you will. And I think that the thing that we really looked at, I mean, when we started this release of Windows that we're going to talk about today, we took a step back and we wanted to, what are the assets we have and what are the best ways to move forward? What are the customer challenges that people have? And one of the things that for me is really striking has just been, over the 25 years of Windows, that we've had has been the flexibility of not just the Windows product, but in a sense the Windows code base, the Windows approach. When you think about what it was like when it started, the world was, CGA monitors and giant machines with, maybe kilobytes of resources.
Right.
And over the years, Windows has gotten richer and it's used more of the Moore's law of hardware, but the scenarios that it's attacked and the way that it's gone after those scenarios has also changed dramatically. And so I think when we
give me
look
an example. I mean, what do you mean?
Well, we've gone from, even just the transition from desktop to laptop. A lot of people, when that was going on, these laptops were this kind of whole new approach to transportable computing.
Yeah.
And there was certainly lots of alternatives and lots of engineering challenges in making that work. Another one is just how we went and took the same Windows operating system kernel and made it go from a single processor 100 megahertz Pentium chip up to these 192 processor gigantic data center servers that we see today, and it is just the same operating system kernel. And so when you think about user interface, we've built Media Center, we've built the pen and the ink interface, we've built.
To name two that basically have failed.
Well, it depends on what you want to measure as success or failure. Certainly, they're all used by lots and lots of people, and
they're not mainstream successes, big hits.
Windows
is used by, as I said, zillions of people, but those two particular things.
Well, I
happen to be an admirer of the
Right.
Media Center user experience, but I wouldn't And I have written admiringly about it, but I don't think it became a big hit.
Well,
I don't think many gazillions of people plug their Windows computers into their TVs and use Media Center for that.
they watch all sorts of video or watch all sorts of photos or play all
Yeah.
sorts of music. It's not just for off-air or cable television signals. But I think that once you get into a feature of Windows, then any one thing is going to get used by some percentage of the base, not just everything. There are only a couple of things that sort of every single person does. But it's that sum total that is really the flexibility of Windows in the first place. And so when we looked at what was going on with tablets or with touch user interface, we sort of just asked ourselves, what else can Windows do? Like, this is not some giant leap. I mean, we'd certainly worked on touch. We were here a couple years ago showing touch in Windows. And we had a certain
Windows 7 has touch.
And Windows 7 has it, and we had a certain
But it has it in a little different way, right? I mean, it's using your finger instead of a mouse to do things
exactly.
that we're already in and classically in all GUIs, really.
Right, exactly. Well, that was in fact in a sense, our design point was, could we attach a touch digitizer to a monitor, and whether it was in a laptop or something else, and then have that work as well as a mouse? And it turns out that probably wasn't the best choice of a design point. At the time, there wasn't like a big touch slate anywhere that you could point to or a touch tablet. And so we thought it would open up a new set of scenarios. We were particularly interested in sort of large screens, like in a classroom or point of sale and things like that. And it works for that super well. It doesn't work as a replacement for the mouse. And we never really thought of it as a replacement like in the Windows Explorer or even browsing itself. We did a bunch of work. But clearly, the world changed underneath it. And whenever the world changes, we take a step back and say, hey, what else can Windows do to change to meet those scenarios? And whether, you think about it, when Windows started, there were almost no computers connected to a network at all. And so the difference between Windows 3.0 and Windows 3.1 was sort of the whole introduction of networking into a PC.
But that was local area networking.
Well, and then Windows 95 introduced TCP/IP and broad internet networking as well, and the Windows NT kernel introduced server networking and all the work that goes with that. And so this flexibility sort of forms the hallmark of sort of what we look at when we start to build a release of the product.
Okay, so I just want to stop you for a minute. I understand you're explaining that you think Windows is versatile enough to work on, I guess you're leading up to saying tablets and other things, but I've always been told, I'm not a coder by any means, but I've always been told that Windows is this gigantic, enormous thing with all this legacy stuff that you've had to keep in there. Some of your competitors have not had to keep in there, but you have all these enterprise customers and others who have custom-written software that's very old that has to still run. So it's this big, bulky thing, and some of us have had that sense on our own computers that, the longer you have Windows, the more it kind of seems to slow down and drag. You just have this sense that it's a big, sluggish thing. When you flip on your iPad or your Android tablet, it feels light, it feels new, it feels like, extremely responsive. You really think, I don't mean to sound like a straight man, but I'm just curious as to why you have this problem. And it's an ironic one. You guys were doing tablets for a long time. They didn't catch on. The guys in Cupertino did a tablet, and somebody said, it's rocking. Great. You want to be there. You want to be in that arena. Why would you turn to this big, heavy Windows thing
Sure.
instead of doing another OS or maybe a shrunken down version of Windows or a scaled up version of your phone OS or something?
Well, of course, on the one hand, everybody said the same thing about servers, so why not write a whole new one because it doesn't have enough stuff.
Everybody didn't, because not everybody cares or talks about servers the way they do about these
Well,
things.
it turns out servers are even
Really
more important now.
I know, they're
So,
really important.
no, I mean, obviously, in a sense, I think it's sort of a fair question, but an unfair question, and I signed up for either. And I think,
Yes, you did.
I think the thing that's most fascinating about the evolution of Windows over the course of the past few decades has been, it grew up with hardware. So the hardware companies are busy doubling every 18 months and adding lots of capacity, and we were doing that with the software part of it as well. And at some point, we reached a plateau in terms of we don't need more of some kinds of the resources, and there are other kinds of resources that we needed more. And what happened was we were doubling the system requirements for base level Windows every release, which turned out to be every 3 or 4 years or something.
Yeah, Vista was a really good example of that.
Well, it turns out every release was like that.
No, but Vista, my recollection was Vista required a particular, I mean, if you tried to put Vista on your existing computer, it didn't work very well. You really had to have a new computer to do it.
Oh, fine. Okay, so yes, every
Yes, you
release,
weren't running Windows.
I'm not trying to say, I'm not passing it, sure, yeah, that might have been worse or better or whatever. But what happened when the transition from Windows Vista to Windows 7 was we looked really hard at this, and we just said, wow, we can do a bunch of work so that we don't need to change the system requirements for the release. And so Windows 7 was the first release. They went down if you look at disks. If you take the three main ones, which are graphics card, and memory, a CPU, and then disk footprint, if you wanted to count that. And so for the first time, we actually went down on system requirements. But a very interesting thing happened along the way, which was what were the system requirements of a phone, or a super smartphone, or a personal computer in your pocket with a 4-inch screen, or whatever. And it turns out those have been doubling, but like every 9 months. And so we've gotten to the point now where the phones actually have the system requirements for Windows in them. So it's not some giant.
They don't have the space for Windows.
Well, they do. I mean, when you look at the system requirements for Windows 7 or a 16.
Well, then why don't your phones just have Windows on them? Why is there this thing called Windows?
Well, we're doing a
Phone
bunch
7?
of work now. Well, one of the big pieces of work that we've done is work on the chipsets that are used in most phones, which are a different instruction set called ARM.
ARM, right.
And so we've been doing that work, and that's something we've shown for Windows already is that working. In fact, we're in Taiwan in about 2 hours or so. We're going to do an update for all of the work that we're showing on ARM, and we'll show a bunch of new devices running that are prototypes that actually look like tablets and look like new form factors running Windows, the next release on ARM. And so we looked at those system requirements, and we looked at the ARM processor and what's available, and we looked at the Windows code base. And we said, well, they're in sync. We can do this work, and we can continue to drive the base system requirements. You know, most phones have 512 megs of RAM. All the slates have 1 gig, and those are looking, the ones in Taiwan now are looking like they're going to move to 2 gig, and that is a base level, Windows machine. And, when you look at the RAM usage, the number of processes or the disk footprint, those are all the same as what you see on the current crop of slates.
So full Windows on a touch,
full, but a new
multi-touch
Windows
tablet.
A new Windows.
Full new Windows, which is being called.
So we had this whole thing about what to call the next release of Windows. So we're just going to call it a code name because I love code names. We're just calling it Windows 8 right now for the purposes of this. We had this whole debate in Office for many years over what to call the release under development. And so we had these big meetings. What should we call it? And we'd have code names. Should we call it like Firestorm or Death
Your
Ray?
code names are always better than your product names at Microsoft. It's true. It's just my observation over 20 years. Your code names are always better than your product.
What was it? Personal photo Twitter delivery service or something? But no, and so should be Firestorm or?
Oh, don't be mean to those guys at Twitter. They're just a small company.
Aren't they one of the four? Wait, I can't
No, they're
remember.
not.
No, they weren't. Right, they're
not. They're like you. They're
like
one of the
us.
exiles.
But and so we started just numbering the releases the same as sort of like what we were thinking.
So you're calling it Windows
8, air quotes, and give us some time, and we'll figure out the actual product name, which we'll do at some later date.
And before we see it, which we will like a minute, it's not the strategy that's been followed by your two bigger competitors, Google and Apple, who felt like they needed to have Google didn't have a legacy computer OS, and Apple did.
They built one.
They built one, but they built it for phones and tablets.
Oh, and then they built their
another
own
one.
legacy OS.
Well, Eric was explaining. Now you didn't listen. He said one's for typing and one's for touching. That's what he said last night.
And you bought that?
I just saying what he said, being a reporter. Apple took a computer OS and I guess stripped it down to some extent and then added some more stuff back into it, but tried to customize something. They didn't move the Mac OS to the iPhone and the iPad. You're taking a different approach. You just explained why you could do it. Why would you want to do it? Why is it a better thing for consumers, in your opinion?
It's better because of all of the things that Windows can bring with it, and all of the, not just the...
Now, here's where I can be the snarky and say, you mean viruses and you know, craplets and all the things that people get on their Windows computers?
Or, you know, printing, or, you know, using solid-state storage really well, or external hard drives, or
Well,
things
the other guys use solid-state storage pretty well.
without, like, weirdness and stuff like that. And so I think, well, what we tried out to do with Windows 8 was really reimagine how to work with the PC, and really think from the chip all the way up to the user interface what it is that we could do different, not just to, you know, get touch and get a slate or a tablet made, but to really think about the broad range of scenarios and really, you know, just reimagine what we want to do with Windows. You could sort of say we colored outside the lines in terms of how we built this release. And so we're excited to talk about it because we think it is a different approach. And maybe it's just because we're not in the gang. You know, we chose a different avenue. Maybe we have real customer and engineering and scenario things that we thought about. But we have an approach that is different, but it also builds on the value of, you know, 400 million PCs that'll probably be sold in the year that we release this product. And that's a big number. And what'll happen is all of a sudden, all of those PCs accrue all of the benefits of the work that we're doing. And it you know, and so...
So both tablets and PCs,
Right.
laptops, desktops, whatever,
all
of this work,
right.
all of this coloring outside the lines spreads across all the...
Right. So what we've done is we've looked at from the ground up, like how to rethink about how you interact with Windows, the kinds of programs that you can run, how you get those programs, all of that work, and really bring it in a, you know, a word we used a lot in developing it was modern, and just how to think about it in a different way that really solves a bunch of the things that people see or say they see are solved in an iPad. And I think we can do that and then bring with it all of these benefits that you have.
And every program that runs in desktop Windows will run on...
Yeah, it's Windows.
all this
so
hardware.
Windows is there, and everything that runs on Windows 7, every device that you can plug into a Windows machine, everything just runs.
Okay, why don't we see
Oh,
it?
okay. Well, before we start, let me just say, you know, who is going to be doing the demo,
Please.
because we got a
That's a
great
good
person
idea.
So doing the demo is Julie Larson-Green, and so Julie's. When you think about how we decide what to put in the product, Julie's job is to manage the team that picks all the features, writes all the specs, and owns the vision of the product. And so she's in her 19th or so year at Microsoft. I think this is the third time we've done a big demo in your audience.
She has demoed here before. She's actually really impressive, I have to say.
So we're pretty excited. And so we've got some cool hardware up here that we're going to do. And so while we're walking over and Julie comes on out. Oops.
Hi, Julie.
Hi, Walt. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Okay.
Hi, Kara.
Okay, I'm going to try to keep this turned so the camera can see it really well.
Now, what is this contraption?
Well, this is a contraption. I got to start with that.
Is this the tablet?
Yeah, with a cutting board on the end. What this is a dev rig. So it's really just we use it for testing the different digitizers and touch screens. So these are all the cards that run the screen, and there's actually a desktop computer underneath here. And so pay attention to the screen. It could be any kind of device. It could be a laptop, a tablet, or keyless.
Is it a normal
keyboardless.
desktop computer?
Yeah,
or
it's just a
some big
normal.
server?
No, you can look at it.
It's an off-the-shelf Core, second generation Core.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so before we start, I think Steven started talking about a little bit, when we sat down in the summer of '09 to we finished Windows 7 to start thinking about what can we do with Windows, what do we want to do next, what's our next release going to look like, we really took a step back and said, let's think about how to reimagine Windows to be more modern, because a lot has happened since Windows 95 and the last time we really changed the interface for Windows. So we took a step back and we looked at all the changes that have been happening, how important it is for you to connect to your social network, how the internet has become such a central part of what you do on the computer, 3G, 4G, wireless computing, and we wanted to really reimagine exactly how you use Windows to be more fast and fluid and get you to all the information, things you care about. So here it is on the lock screen. This is what happens when you come to Windows. That's my son on there. And when you start, you'll have your own personalized screen that gives you a little bit of information about what your computer's been doing while you've been away. And to get into Windows, you just swipe up from the bottom, go into Login, and this is Windows, and this is where you come after you start Windows. It's the new Start screen. So no longer do you go to a blank desktop. You come into where all your programs are, a series of live tiles that tell you all kinds of information about what's been going on since the last time you were in here. You can arrange.
Looks a little bit like Windows Phone.
It does. Definitely, Microsoft's developed its own kind of design style, and we worked with the phone team to learn the best of the things that they were
But
doing
it's running,
and apply it.
this is full Windows,
This is
but
full Windows.
the user experience here will remind people of Windows
Absolutely,
Phone.
it's a family feel across Microsoft, and we have a real close-knit design community that shares ideas.
Did you like what was happening on the phone to do that, or what was
Absolutely. We've also just reimagined it for the form factor, for the larger screen, and be able to take advantage of more space. So the live tiles can tell you a little bit more detail.
Right.
You can also do more rearranging and organizing and
Can
grouping.
we get that
tiles
back up on the screen?
Yeah. Let's get okay.
Great.
Okay, so here I am, just all my programs I want to use. I'm going to go ahead and click on the weather here, and it's going to take me right into an immersive, full-screen tailored application. So this application is written with our new developer platform, which is based on HTML5 and JavaScript. So
I don't think that captures just how cold it
how
was
cold it
here
is.
yesterday.
Yeah, my hands are freezing.
I know.
And so people can write new applications for Windows using the things that they are doing already on the internet. So I'm going to swipe in from the right-hand side here, turn to the side, and go back to the start screen. And this is where you go just to get back and forth between your
That
programs.
thing you did on the right-hand side, is that a universal way of getting back to
That's a
things?
universal way of getting back. So,
So
here,
there's
I'll
no
show
button. There's not going to be a button on
you. No, it's just swipe in from the side.
it? So-
So here we are. Actually, that doesn't look too good right there.
It doesn't, no.
And the platform has all been redesigned for touch, so all the things that you'd normally expect for developers to do to create touch experiences here. So I'm going to swipe in again from the right, bring that back up, go back
What are the
over.
other
So no more
things-
start button down here, no more taskbar?
There, this is the replacement for the start menu, definitely.
So what else was on that thing on the side?
On the side, you'll have to come to our developer conference in September to find out more about
Thank
that.
you. I can't wait.
What do you call that bar on the side?
We haven't named it yet.
Firestorm.
Just call it the side.
Windows 8 thing.
Windows 8
It's
bar on the
the Windows
side.
8
See, this is what I mean, but this is why you're not in the gang of four.
Okay,
Those
I'm
guys
sorry.
all name
What else
things
was there?
really
What else
well.
was there?
Go back over it again?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm going to start video here really quick. And,
I give up.
if I go back over it, there,
So it's search,
I'm not going to sit there too long.
right?
Search, share,
Share.
start,
Setting.
Connect, settings.
kinetic.
We have a
and
whole
settings.
developer conference that's going to talk about
All right.
how to fill
Yeah, I
those in.
know, but
These people aren't going to be there.
we like to do things first.
So now I'm going to go ahead and start some video and start playing that. And now our whole goal was to really make the system fast and fluid. So here I am running different programs. If I want to switch between them, I just swipe out from the left-hand side, switch quickly between them.
Whoa.
If I want to do two things at once, I can snap to either side. I can continue switching while I watch my movie.
Wait, what was that? Snap?
It builds on Windows 7 Snap, where you can slide things over.
That was one of Julie's things.
Right, yeah. Snap.
And so you can do two things at once very easily. And then I
Cool.
can just drag it off, go back to
handsome.
full screen, and stop. So if you don't have a tailored application for what you're trying to do, you always have Internet Explorer to get to all the things that you want to do on the internet. And we've redesigned Internet Explorer to be a touch-first experience. So here I am scrolling the Wall Street Journal homepage.
Does the Wall Street Journal always come up first?
Yeah, it's
Well,
the
on
default
my
homepage
machine, it
now,
always
yeah.
comes up
All
first.
right.
This is all of IE. This is all of
digital would
Internet.
be nice.
All right, I'll change it.
It's all of Internet Explorer 10 too.
After
so.
today.
Yeah.
This is
Oh, this is IE10?
This is Internet Explorer 10. I'm going to swipe up from the bottom and get the user interface for
Wait,
switching
you
between
swipe
tabs
off from the side to get the thing
to
and
get back to the front,
Right.
between applications on the left, and from the bottom to get the UI for
So
the application.
one of the big deals in IE9, or I guess the big deal, was the idea that you could put your sort of bookmarks in the taskbar.
Yes.
That's gone because
No,
you're
you-
changing all of
You
this.
can put them in the start screen and on the taskbar, which we'll get to in just a second.
All right.
So here I am swiping up at the bottom. I can click in, get the on-screen keyboard. It has some familiar things that you're probably used to from using Windows. If I press the Control key, I get the Control X, Control C, Control V kind of shortcuts. I get arrow keys, which is super nice thing to be able to go in. And I also can switch my keyboard to different styles of keyboard, either the pen keyboard or the split screen keyboard. So when you're using
This is interesting.
a slate or tablet-like device, it makes it very easy for you to thumb type like you would on the phone and walk around and be mobile while you're typing. So I'm going to go ahead and type.
Julie, is this like about a 10-inch screen here?
This is a 10.6-inch screen. It's 720p, 1366 by 768. Very bright, high-quality test machine. Perfect for HD video, 16 by 9 aspect ratio.
So you have a split keyboard, which I'm not sure I've ever seen on a tablet. That's interesting.
I went to the wrong thing there. So
Elevate,
now we'll go back over and so I showed you new style applications,
Right.
showed you web pages, but you're probably wondering, as Steven talked about, what about other Windows applications that I might know or things that my company has built that I need to use. So here I am, all the things that you can use on Windows or that you want to use and the things that you love to use are here in the start screen. So here I have Office, Word, PowerPoint, Excel, etc. I can go ahead and click to Excel and I have the desktop. So just like you would expect, everything about the
There it is
desktop
again.
is here.
It's back.
So if I go to
I
Word,
like the other pretty one.
Yeah, it's like, now we're in regular Windows.
regular Windows.
Well, we're in Windows all the time.
Yes, Stephen,
and
I know.
this is the Windows that you see in Windows 7.
But you
I see,
yeah, but
okay.
you made it pretty.
So here's all,
So why didn't the Office, seriously, if you're really going to this bold new color outside the lines design, and it's part of your whole design ethos and design family, why didn't the Office team rewrite Office into that kind of approach?
well, they may do some things in the future, but we don't think people should have to give up everything they know and love
Okay.
just to get to a more mobile form factor. So people can plug in a mouse and keyboard and use it just
We're
like,
hearing their ad campaign. This is what it's going to be.
just like they would otherwise. So here I am. I'm in the very much improved touch interface. I go back into Excel and dock this up at the top of the screen. I'm just grabbing it in the wrong spot. But the new style applications can also get all the access and facilities of Windows too. So it's not like a choice you have to make between two shells. It's not two shells, it's just one shell. So if I go back to my Twitterama application,
Twitterama.
this is our own little, all these apps I'm showing you are just sample applications that we've built based on our platform. So here I am in my tweets. I'm going to go ahead and do a little post and say, this is a demo. Go click on the file system, and we have a fully redesigned access to all the parts of the file system. So in my application, if you want to, go ahead and touch that on the
Last
screen.
time you
You'll
got
have
mad when I
responsive-
touched
Well,
I know, it's
we're-
working better now.
Wait, I screwed up.
Went all the way over there. That's
All
all
right.
right. We'll go back.
I'm lost.
There you go.
All right. Okay.
And so you just click to select, put things in the basket down here. Of course, I can get to
The
anything
basket, that's this
along
thing,
the
yeah.
bottom. Mhm.
Yeah.
And get to anything on this computer or anything over the network. And then also new for Windows 8 is a way for applications to present their information. So if I had say a photo service and I wanted to get files or photos from that to put into my Twitter feed, I could go to my photo feeder application and everything that I have access to or other things that my friends have posted are right here. So instead of leaving my application and going back to another application, I can just do it all in one place. And then your basket can contain as many different files from different locations as you want. So I click import there and click post, and there I'm posted. So it's very easy to switch back and forth between the different things. I have this, I can go back and forth to the desktop, I can go back.
Can you expand that so it's like
full
full
screen?
screen?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, wow, okay.
And so I can just quickly go back between different things here. I can work in my Twitterama app. I can type in Excel. I can go back, choose another one, go back to Excel. And if I want to see them side by side, just pull it out. And now I can do both at the same time.
And how would you use other apps on this? Existing apps?
Other existing apps, you use just the same way. You go to the start screen and choose what application you want to run, and it comes up and you run.
So there's not a separate applications thing here. It's just like these tiles can be anything.
They can be anything. Anything.
And the
any-
user can organize them
You
however
can
she
organize
wants.
them however she or he wants. You can group them. You can have small icon, large icon. You can get lots of live information and notifications or not have notifications, all under your control about what's in here. And it's all the things that you know and love in a kind of a fast and
So you
fluid.
could, if, for instance, if you were really more of a social networking person, this could be all social networking things.
Right.
If you were interested in,
Now.
having your
All your news in
bookmarks
one place.
or all your news or all your favorite apps. You know how people
Right.
today, despite all your great efforts at finding ways to organize things, people cover their desktop
Absolutely.
with shortcuts.
Right. And so you can organize it and group it and play around with it however you want. Your company can put the things that your
Can I-
company wants to look. Yeah,
What's piano?
not very many in there.
What is piano? Is that an app?
I think we turned the tile off. Maybe no, we didn't. It's another sample application that we built. But
you're-
this isn't just for, so I say it one more time, this isn't just for tablet OSs or touch-first devices. It works touch-first, and everything about it works first. And developers can write their applications for touch, but then if it's a machine with a mouse and keyboard, like this one over here is both touch and a mouse and keyboard, it works just the same way. So if I touch, I can log right in here. And we do the work to make sure that mouse and keyboard works as well as it does with touch, so the developer doesn't have to think about what kind of thing they're
So you
designing.
can use the,
Keyboard with it as
Yeah,
well.
so
See the
this
cursor
this
there?
is a Lenovo X220T, which is actually also in the science fair, and it's a brand new tablet PC that does both ink and everything, but it's a Windows 7 machine. Actually, all 4 of these are Windows 7 machines.
So here
And
I
so
am
they're all
using
running the builds of Windows. This one happens to do, the first 3 of them happen to do touch. And we also have a Dell Duo, which is a small format convertible slate and
Right
and
here. Yep,
machine as
same.
well. This
but
is,
That's the
that's the one with the
screen that
flips around, yeah.
pops out. I'm not,
yep.
But it doesn't have to be a touch screen necessarily.
No, in fact,
that's-
well, the next one is a touch-only device, which is the EP124 ePad, and it's touch
Very
only.
good name also,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, one of the things that I had nothing to do with that name.
I know, Stephen, I know.
Nothing at all.
I know.
But the thing that's also neat is all of Windows is here. So if you wanted to plug in a keyboard, a Bluetooth keyboard, you get
And
the
a mouse.
keyboard experience, and a mouse. You get the keyboard experience like you would with a laptop. All the arrow keys work, the control keys work. It's a full experience. The one on the end is just the new Samsung that a lot of folks have been talking about. That's
Series
super thin,
9.
Series 9, second generation, and it has no touch screen at all. But keyboard as a primary interface with arrow keys and a mouse works just
so
fine.
hundreds of millions of PCs will run Windows 8, just like with Windows 7. Hundreds of millions.
So-
Doesn't matter if it's touch or not touch.
Again, I'm curious, why aren't you changing Office also, all the rest of them, in this design paradigm? Because it's a huge shift in.
This is the biggest shift.
Well,
in
this
the-
is
Well,
only
we
a
left the
small
Office team.
part.
We both
Yeah,
worked
we
it out.
don't
We're
work in
done.
Office
So we're on
anymore.
Windows now.
But I mean,
and-
if you're looking for the whole experience, if the idea of everything's changed, I sort of was looking at this very beautiful screen. I went, oh, the ugly old house is back. You know, I mean, kind of thing. Why not switch the whole thing? Because Bing
She
is
designed the ugly old house.
I know.
Yeah,
I know.
don't
No,
take it
no, what I
personally.
mean is, this is a whole different look. This is a whole different thing you're doing. Why not make everything? Because
Well,
Bing fits into this.
There's a lot of
nicely.
utility in existing Office around running macros and doing things that take keyboard-intensive
Right.
time. And I'm
Right.
sure that the Office
gonna last
team is going to will look at what we're doing.
Right.
And
You can stop now.
It's
All
just
right.
jarring. It's a jarring shift. So this, but you expect these to be used more on these kind of things or these?
your choice.
Which was it? The whole Windows itself?
Yeah. Which one? Where do you expect this to be more popular?
She means regular
You can, yeah.
mouse-driven things or
Anything.
touch-driven
I
things
think
or
it's- that's-
tablets or laptops or...
I think that's the only choice that a customer has to make is what kind of machine works
Yeah.
for their utility, whether they want something that they can
Well, there's still
travel with.
other operating system choices, I
Sure.
should point out. So there
Right.
some
Once
other
we
choices
once
as
we
well.
get them in the door, then all the choices of all the different PCs, and I think that that's a super important thing because it's right now you see this sort of weird world of like aftermarket products to try to turn it into a laptop or try to add a keyboard to it or peripherals. If you didn't like the camera that came with it, you wanted one with higher definition, you wanted to use a particular printer or a scanner or anything that's out there, all of those things continue to work, and there'll be new ones and all sorts of scenarios. And this scales from about an 8-inch screen using today's current DPI and all the way to wall-sized displays. And whether you have a touch grid overlaid over it or you're using a mouse and a keyboard.
Stephen, how long have you been at Microsoft?
A while, 22.
22 years.
Yeah.
And I know you haven't been working on Windows all that time, only the last, what,
Six.
6
years.
years?
Five.
But this seems to me like the biggest change in the user interface of Windows I can remember.
Since Windows 95.
Yeah, that's right. That's when it went full sort of
To a desktop kind of metaphor. Yeah. It's
to
So it's
a GUI
reimagined for everything that's happened in that time frame. And we're
But
really
I would
just
say this
showing
is
us-
even bigger because that was like a very, very much more refined version of what the Mac had started and what Windows 3.1 had and all that, 3.0, 3.1. This is not, you know, it doesn't look at anything like the menus and the icons and the familiar GUI, although you can switch into it. Could somebody who was uncomfortable with this just run in the
desktop
old house, as Tara said?
Yes.
It's very
They
nice.
want
So they could have all of their desktop programs in the start screen and then just go to the desktop and never go into
And when's it coming out
Yeah.
for consumer use?
Maybe I could use the answer from before. It's like a Defense Department secret.
No, it's not.
I mean, they're really no.
It really isn't. Now, I know it's easy for you guys in Redmond to confuse, but it's not.
Well, they're
national
big customers.
security.
Does that count?
No.
No. Right now we're focused on getting the release done. The next milestone for us is the developer conference in September. And you know, look, every 2 to 3 years,
But
a new release.
it's 2012.
Every 2 to 3 years is a good release.
Last
And so when was the last release?
It was general availability was October of 2009.
That's one. So
So it could be this fall, if we're saying 2 to 3 years.
We don't need to. It won't be this fall, but let's not.
All right. Okay.
But I also-
do you think
I want-
this is so consumer oriented? It's much more the phone, the consumer. Businesses troubled or embrace? Are you worried about them looking at it and thinking it's
You know,
more
it's too
consumer?
consumery or something?
I think people that use computers are very similar, whether they're in their businesses or working at home, and that a consistent experience is really important for them. So much of your life is blurred between work and home these days.
So, Julie, since you pulled off this demo so brilliantly, you get a chair.
Oh.
Let's
Whoa.
go back.
I'm going to get off. Thanks a lot.
We're going to talk a little more. Go ahead and sit.
I think on the late.
It doesn't matter
you go
which
into
one
that
you're
one.
sitting in.
but-
I don't care. So, I mean, just don't eat my chocolates over there, Julie. That's
All right.
So, it is pretty radical for you guys, right?
I think it's a big change, but not a big change because compatibility is still there. So people can have the familiar
It's pretty
applications and
radical.
apps.
People
But it-
turn that on, it doesn't look like what they think Windows looks like.
Right. I would agree. Yeah.
And like I say, if they knew enough about the phone situation, they might say, oh, this reminds me of Windows Phone. If they really were students of Microsoft UIs, they might even say, it has some elements that I can trace back in my head to
Sure.
Media Center
Yep.
and Zune and some of the other UI work that the company has done.
Absolutely.
But an average person walking into Best Buy and going to look at a Windows laptop is going to be shocked when they look at that. Now, maybe you will have done a ton of advertising. I'm sure you will have by then. But it's jolting, isn't it? I mean,
It's definitely different. It really takes to account all the changes that have happened in the industry and all the technologies. And while we just showed the user interface here, all of Windows, every subsystem of Windows has been reimagined to be modern, I think is the word Steven used earlier, to kind of really rethink our assumptions and rethink what customers are trying to do today and really try to bring that to the device front and center.
and will there be, I guess Kara kind of asked this, and you dodged it by saying you're not in Office anymore, but let me just broaden the question. You're going to have a developers conference that you mentioned. You're going to have developer tools so that third-party apps can look like this?
Oh, sure. What we were showing was some sample apps that we've written, but underneath all of this is a whole new set of APIs and a new way for developers to write applications built on HTML5, on JavaScript, and on those type of tools. And that's what you saw in the new applications. But it's not just those tools and those languages, but you also have access to a whole set of new services like the file picker that you saw to pick photos. That's a common operation, and so now we have a way to build, using those kinds of tools, this very easy way to build a touch-centric and a touch-first user experience for using those facilities in Windows, and still connect you to all that is Windows, the file system, networking, devices, everything that's there. And then connect all those programs together. You saw it was subtle, but it's a really important point, which is we're going to, and in September we'll talk a lot about how applications can also connect with each other. So that it's not just little islands of applications that do one thing, but the applications have ways of sharing information and consuming information from all the other applications on your system.
Give me an example of what you mean.
Well, the photos was a good example where here's an application over here that is all about photos in the cloud, and then you want to post a photo, and it's easy for that application in a sense to publish a connection to those photos so that when you're in your fake Twitter application that we had, you can pull up photos from this other application that really are in the cloud.
Well, I mean, I think Apple has a media picker across some of their apps that you can use, not just photos, but music, video, whatever.
Right. So
Well, it's a
this is
same
finite,
idea,
set
isn't
of, a
it?
finite set of data types and a finite set of applications have access to those things. And this is a broad use for a broad opportunity for developers.
So anyone who creates an application can give access to people to the things that they have stored in their service or wherever they have it located.
So, is there if I'm a developer, am I not confronted with a philosophical difference between an app that uses the mouse and a physical keyboard and an app that is like an iPad app today or a Honeycomb app on Android? Aren't those different design approaches I need to think about? You keep calling this touch-centric or touch-first, and that's the approach you've apparently taken with the OS. But in terms of the apps, if you're saying to me, hey, it's Windows, it'll run on all these Windows machines, that's really attractive to me. But then I have to figure out, well, it really affects the way I design the app, whether I expect somebody to be using a mouse or I expect somebody to be using touch. So how do you get around that question?
Do you want me to answer? Oh.
Yes, design person.
So you design for touch, and then in the operating system, we detect whether you have a mouse and keyboard, and we translate the touch commands to equivalent
And that won't
mouse and keyboard.
seem clumsy?
No,
I mean,
actually,
that beautiful swiping of all those groupings of tiles
And you can
across.
use the keyboard.
You doing that with a mouse? Isn't that going to be
you
a
use
little
that with
weird?
the keyboard to arrow it through the
I
different
mean,
keys.
the touchpad or
You
the
can use
arrows or what?
arrows and the Windows key and the mouse and the scroll wheel.
You're keeping the Windows key?
Yes. That will bring you to the start screen.
I see. Is that all it does?
Yes.
But it's really important to, in a sense, not throw the baby out with the bathwater. We all love interacting with apps on our touch phones, on small screens. We love when it gets a little bit bigger and we're doing similar kinds of scenarios using a similar set of applications. But you have to keep in mind that the mouse and the keyboard, they're just tools. They're not evil in and of themselves. They're not, a pain in the neck in and of themselves. They actually help magnify and amplify the efforts of your hands. A mouse has a precision that your finger can't
Right.
approach. And so there are applications for
The
which...
last guy up here to say that was Steve Jobs, actually.
Yeah, and
He was making a completely different point, but
if I could be in that
saying the
company,
same
that's
thing.
awesome.
he's in the gang of four. Let me just point that out.
So I'm like I got like 1 foot in the door.
I
I'm
don't
so
know. I'm not
confused.
sure of one
But
quote
in all,
that
I mean, when you think about it, like if you take like a Microsoft product like Visio, it's this incredible tool that is used in tons of industries, and it's really important. Your finger doesn't have the resolution to manipulate those diagrams, or even a lot of Photoshop uses. Yes, there's a whole bunch of scenarios that as a consumer you can remove red eye or do some brightness and hue or leveling and stuff like that, but a huge amount of the scenarios require a much higher level of precision to deal with. And then certainly as a writer, there's a certain amount of writing you can do, typing on glass with thumbs or with 2 hands. And then when you want to write the Great American Novel or just one of my blog posts, then it turns into needing a keyboard. And so I think that one of the things that's really, I think, intriguing and certainly part of the reimagining that we've done is that if you have a 10.6-inch slate that's very, very thin, that has always on, always connected, that's running Windows, you can carry it around all the time, and then you just plug a keyboard in, it is a Windows laptop then. Like whether you have a fancy convertible, attachable, magnet, whatever kind of keyboard, or you just plug an actual full-size keyboard in. It's all of Windows, and all of those apps pick up the benefits of plugging in that keyboard and using that mouse.
All right, so there's a million questions that flow from this, and we're going to take some from the audience, but I just have a few. What about security? I mean, am I really going to have to install on this lovely thing that you've just invented that looks so different and fresh from Windows? Am I really going to have to install some antivirus program that's going to pop up and announce, that do I want to quarantine this, or do you want to scan now, or do you want to scan later, or renew if it's not the free one you guys have? I mean, I remember, is that going to continue, or are you going to tell me that I'm not going to have to run AV software or security software.
I think it's probably always going to be a good idea to be running security software, and I think as we've seen, just this past week on the Mac, the world is going to continue to change, and if anybody who thinks that those smartphones that are out there are not targets, I think is going to find that that's just not really going to be the case for much longer. There's just too many bad guys.
Do you run security software on your Mac?
On my Mac, I don't. I will run whatever they push down to my machine this week. So.
Oh, what about do you have a personal Mac?
No, I mean, not they, whatever Apple will start.
Right, that's not a separate security app that kind of interrupts you all. You know what I mean?
I think right now
you'll run whatever the new version of their OS is that they think will
Right.
fix this. We don't know, but.
I think, for today, let's just say we're here to talk about the user interface.
No, I have a serious question.
Oh, I'm not trying to.
Because you keep saying this is real Windows, and I understand that. And that's going to, I assume that's going to be your differentiator, right? You're coming to the party somewhat late, but you're coming to the party with full Windows, no compromise, right? I'm making this up off the top
Well, no
of my head.
compromises.
No
We love that
compromise.
word.
Seems to me to be, if I were translating what you're saying, gorgeous, touch first, all that great stuff you want, but by the way, no compromise, because here's, like Kara says, the old house is under there also. So the old house had a bunch of stuff going that some people didn't like, most people didn't like, which was security problems and or security software. The only thing that's almost as bad as having a virus is running the software to prevent it. So are we...
Keep going. I don't have to do anything.
No, Steven, are we going to be done with that? You're in charge of Windows. You've been doing it for 6 years.
I run, on all of my machines, I run Microsoft Security Essentials, and I never get prompted for anything. I just run it, download stuff all the time. I never get a pop-up. I think it's possible to write security software that you never see until something bad happens.
It is possible.
Security is essentials. I never get asked to do anything. It just runs. And I think that's a great approach. I think as we move forward, you're going to see not just us, but a lot of people adopt that kind of metaphor. And I think it's going to be important, and I think it's going to appear on all of our devices. And I just don't see and whether it's built in or you have to acquire it, I just don't see a device being free of protection.
And what about when this gets in the hands of the OEMs and somebody's willing to pay them $1 or $5 to run trial software and craplets and all that other stuff, but now they can put them in those tiles. So the first screen of tiles I see, and this is already happening on Windows Phone, as you know, is, in the case of Windows Phone, it's usually the carrier who's taking over a third or half of your first screen or something like that. I guess it depends which one. And I'm not trying to pick on any one particular OEM, but Dell or HP, well, I guess HP is moving away from Windows, so maybe they're not a good example. But Dell or somebody, Acer, are they going to?
Well, I think the most important thing for us is that the customer is in control of their environment and in control of the PC. So adding or removing applications and tiles is super easy with Windows 8. We are working with all the OEMs on how we go to market and what's there and what can be there and what has to be chosen by the user, but we don't have any details yet.
Are these all going to boot up or start up as fast as a MacBook Air or an iPad?
Well, that's something that you really can do today. We just did a demonstration in Taipei of several new machines that all suspend, resume instantaneously, and I think we have a bunch of fundamentals work that we'll talk about in September that enables both that kind of scenario.
But do you think that's the actual real world experience on Windows machines purchased at Best Buy today by?
Well, for standby and resume, it generally is. The last time you and I had this discussion, I produced a chart with the real world data of like a gazillion machines.
I have a whole collection of your charts from over the years. I treasure them.
You treasure them. Wow, I'm touched. I think that we can continue to do a lot of work with our OEM partners, and we provide lots of tools, lots of information, lots of guidance. I think it's important to understand that they do view the things that they do as adding value to the PC experience. And
okay. Let's take some questions, a few questions. You got to go to the mic, sir. Yes.
Yeah, hi. Very nice work on the UI. It looks gorgeous. When Apple switched from the 68K to the PowerPC and from the PowerPC to Intel, they had a very nice transition strategy for existing applications. Do you have a strategy for existing legacy Intel applications as they move to ARM?
No, we're on the ARM machines. We already have talked about this at our CES event. We're not going to introduce a virtualization model and a way to run sort of old x86 software. That turns out to be technically really challenging, and we decided that the experience that we could deliver with the modern applications, all written in HTML5, JavaScript, and delivering them that way, would probably yield a better experience over time. And of course, Intel will make a ton of great processors and a great opportunity to build terrific PCs of all shapes and sizes with their processors, which maintain all of that investment and all of that code.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hello, I'm Loic Lemer from Seismic. I have a Windows Phone 7 app, which is on Silverlight, and I have a desktop app, which is also on Silverlight. And here you've talked about HTML and JavaScript. I'm kind of obsessed with this question since yesterday, but so what should I code for? What should I get prepared for? Is it Silverlight, or do I trash everything and I start all over again?
You just, I love those questions. Should I do the really, really bad thing? It's like an IQ test for me. Don't do the bad thing. No, the browser that we showed runs Silverlight, just like you would expect we plan on, and certainly all the desktop browsers are there, just like Word and Excel you saw. You could run Chrome or Firefox or even Internet Explorer with the existing user interface. So Silverlight will have a place and a way of running those applications there. Now, there's a broader question, which I could do the free consult, but there's a lot of where else you want your application to run and what your browser-based strategy is for your mobile devices and things like that. And I think those are all trade-offs that developers have to make. There isn't one easy answer across the universe of things that people need to do. But I think we support the most different ways of writing software. So there is the opportunity for you to reach the most different platforms by targeting the one that we have.
But I keep my code, and I can evolve it.
Certainly on the Silverlight on the PC side.
Good, thank you.
Stuart.
Stephen, so the world's gotten really complicated in terms of the number of operating systems and devices that are out there. And so you just used the word virtualization to refer to virtualizing the processor. But I want to ask about a different level of virtualization. What's the role of virtualization in the operating system relative to the ecosystem out there, and how do you fit in with WebOS, iOS, all that kind of stuff in an enterprise environment where you're running applications?
Sure. Well, the enterprise environment right now in the business world, they're very, very focused on the opportunities for using virtualization to not just enable running of applications in an isolated way, but to isolate the entire individual's computing experience from the rest of the world. And so we're seeing a lot of enterprises where people carry around their virtualized environment sort of in a pocket, whether they're literally on a removable media or they're stored in some cloud-based storage. And I think that's an area of significant investment in Windows 8, and you'll definitely expect to hear more about what we've done in virtualization down the road.
Okay, next.
Yeah, you talked about your Taipei announcement in a couple of hours, and you talked about ARM. Is there any discussion about Atom at that time, or is it on Windows 8?
Atom.
Oh, yeah.
Windows runs, I showed Windows 8, the convertible one that I showed there is an Atom processor.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Hi, Tim O'Reilly from O'Reilly Media. I want to return to the question of the Gang of Four in a particular way. First off, I really like the UI that you're showing, but it strikes me that one of the big differences between what you're showing and the Gang of Four is that a big part of what they have are applications in which the data is what's driving things. You know, and in particular, network effects in data seems to be what makes Google and Facebook and Apple and Amazon such interesting dynamic companies. They're harnessing millions of people to build a service that actually literally gets better the more people use them. Now, Microsoft has services of that nature, but they don't seem to be featured in what you're doing. And I'm wondering, are you making the same mistake that IBM made back in 1981 when they thought, hey, this is all about hardware, and you guys are thinking, oh, this is all about software, and you're not integrating Microsoft's data assets into the core of your OS.
Thank you. Thanks, Tim.
So no, if it was a bad thing, we're not doing that, I think, for sure. But no, I mean, well, we have a lot of services. We didn't show any of those here today, but Hotmail with 300 million members, and Messenger with another 300 million or so, SkyDrive with 70 million unique users, plus they connect all over the place, plus Skype we're working on integrating that as well. And Azure as a developer platform, and the work. Actually, all of these applications that connected up to the cloud are connecting up to Azure-based services, just as we're demonstrating building.
A huge corporate social networking exchange,
And
et cetera, et cetera.
And Office 365 and SharePoint and.
Right. I guess the question though is, to what extent are they informing the product design? It would be really fabulous, it seemed to me, if you guys actually thought how to show that.
Sure.
And make that part of your story so that people understand that is actually what makes it a modern platform, not having a touch screen.
I showed a few of the elements, how we're rethinking around. I didn't show all the details around notifications or things like that, or how applications can talk to each other and get information from each other to make the experience better. But the whole start screen being alive and connected from the get-go without having to go to your desktop and then decide where you want to go today. It's just everything is there in front of you. When we are done and show the full version of Windows, all of those applications and things will be part of the experience, all of the services behind it. We work very closely with all those teams.
We are the Windows and Windows Live team, so we have Hotmail and Messenger are all part of one team. We're just not on that yet today.
All right.
Right.
Okay.
It's hard to only talk about a
Josh,
small
this
part.
is going to have to be the last question.
Okay.
And I know it'll be a good one, Josh.
It might be a good one. Oh. So, how is what you're showing to me, Walt? You said you thought it was jolting the way it looked, and I agree. The look and feel is really jolting. How is it different than TouchSmart, or if HP wants to run WebOS as a layer on top of Windows? They have an SDK, which is HTML and JavaScript based. How is it different than that? This feels like a layer that sits on top of what you showed running Office, which is Windows. Just like the Windows we know.
We both want to jump on this one.
Well,
so
go ahead, you start.
No, you should. Go ahead.
It's not a layer, it's Windows. So all of the things are equal peers to each other, and it runs across hundreds of millions of PCs. It's not a singular set of PCs from a particular manufacturer. It works across the largest variety of computers, with keeping the developer platform the same for folks across all those different devices. So it's much more seamless than it sounds. It's not two shells. It's just very fast and fluid and
Right, but there's two different. I wouldn't code an app I wouldn't code and see and compile for this, what you showed us. That's something that's lighter. It's less than what Windows is, where you compile a native application. But you're taking
right, but the platform gives you access through HTML and JavaScript to the power of the PC. So you can use DX graphics to create your HTML JavaScript application. You can use the file system, access to network, access to devices that are connected to your computer through HTML5 and JavaScript.
So okay, really
It's not
quickly.
an app.
Could I if I was a tablet maker, could I make a tablet where the windowed part, where the Windows part you never went to it, where it was just the new UI and you never touched any other part of the old Windows?
If you don't have a desktop application, you won't, and you don't click on the desktop icon, you would never see it.
But as an OEM, could I make a product that just lived you 100% in that UI?
Well, as an OEM, we're an end user. It is Windows, or as we should say, if you're an enterprise and you want to do a machine, a kiosk that only lets you run 3 applications, just like you can do that today, we have all the facilities in there that would enable an administrator to administer that after you do your NT authenticated log on with a smart card or something.
But you can write, so for instance, the Pages program that Apple had on the Mac and then rewrote for Touch for the iPad, you could write if the Office team or some third party wanted to write, or Apple even wanted to write that for this.
Absolutely.
They could do it, and like Josh says, and we'd never see what we think of today as Windows.
Absolutely.
We'd never see a thing with a taskbar and a
Right.
desktop and icons.
Right.
Absolutely.
And somebody could, I want to repeat his question because I want to be clear about it. An OEM could make a tablet in which the user would never see normal window, what I think of as normal windows or traditional
No,
windows?
you can't turn the desktop off. It's part of the system, so it's there all the time, well, like as part of the way that it works. So you can choose never to go there, but it's always available to you.
It's underneath. The code is there.
But if there were a flood of, so will there be a flood of apps written in HTML5 and all these new languages that look like the new interface? Isn't it going to discourage people from doing that because they can just continue along writing the old stuff because it's always going to be there?
Well, I think that what we're going to show starting at the developer conference is not just like, oh, isn't this cool? Here's yet another way to write software. But it's also a way to distribute the software. It'll be the tools that you can use. It'll be the ease at which you can write the software. And then essentially, from a business point of view, the number of sockets that you have access to, all running this exact kind of operating system. And so when you think about planning out where should we spend our developer resources, well, in September, we'll have a conference and you'll learn like, hey, when this product comes out, the run rate of PCs will be able to run the programs that you write. Right. And then people will be able to discover them, will be able to acquire them and install them.
And you're talking about new style programs that resemble this approach, not the ones that I can click into, like when Julie clicked into Excel.
Correct.
Right.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you very much,
Thanks.
guys.
Thank you.